Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. This is a special extra show which we thought would bring you just to be able to try and give you a little bit of an Rangers-related injection, albeit there is a feast of football happening at the Euros. My name is Cammy Bell. I'm your host on Extra, as always. And for this special, I had to be able to try and produce an extra special guest. You see what I did there? I don't just make this up in the spot, believe you me. And that is my very, very good friend, Mr. Stephen Clifford from Four Lads Had a Dream. Stevie, firstly, thank you for coming on. And frankly, my good friend, it has been a crime that has been taking so long for us to be able to try and get some podding done together. But thank you so much for sparing your time.
First of all, thanks for the invite, Cammy. A very nice intro, much appreciated. Nice to talk to everybody, and you're right, it definitely has been too long. We've planned the pod together for so long, haven't we? And then life just gets in the way, but it's brilliant to be here, and I'm looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stevie, we will obviously talk about this towards the kind of end as well, but keen just to have a quick chat with you before we jump into the content for this week regarding all the great stuff that you and all of the guys across at Four Lads have been doing in terms of some of your own shows and all that kind of stuff as well. How's it all been going? Some of the shows that I've been able to kind of catch up with and stuff as well has been absolutely fantastic. I hope you're enjoying making it as much as I'm enjoying listening to it.
Yeah, thank you, mate. Like, genuinely, to give a wee bit of background, I think things on blogging wise and reading wise has kind of slowed down. And I've done some reading into kind of researching on why that was. And a lot of things that people were saying is they prefer to listen. And at first, I was a wee bit shy about going into that kind of arena because there's so many fantastic pods led the way by Heart and Hand out there on Ranger stuff. And I enjoyed being on Heart and Hand as well. So I was a bit reluctant, but in order to keep things going in the trajectory that you want it to go, because we could be happy just to sit and be club partners and things like that, but you want to enjoy it. And I've actually managed, Cammy, to get my enthusiasm back for the whole kind of Rangers side of it, and I am enjoying the podcast and stuff, and I'm enjoying the shows that we're doing. So it's supposed to be kind of smaller, bite-sized, 30 minutes, 20-minute kind of stuff. So hopefully, and certainly by the feedback we're getting, people are enjoying it. But it's nice to return home and be back here.
Well, listen, mate, you know you'll always have a home at Heart and Hand. You know that, my friend. For this show, Stevie, what we did was we actually went into our Heart and Hand Chief Executive tier and asked those subscribers if they had any questions that you maybe wanted us to be able to try and go through. And as always, they turned up trumps. So we've got quite a wide range of questions, some Rangers, some football, and some non-football related as well, which we'll get into in due time. But obviously keen to kind of get your thoughts so far in terms of what you've seen from Rangers in the transfer window, some of the signings that are obviously over the line, some of the prospective ones that we've been talking about. I know that at time of recording, we're doing this on Wednesday afternoon. We are pretty close to being able to get the Connor Barron signing over the line, hopefully. And again, with Liam Kelly due to put pen to paper, again, fingers crossed, I hope. But just keen to kind of get your thoughts generally on our approach to our signings. If you're happy with what you're seeing so far, anything that you'd like to see us go after.
I'm quite relaxed on it. I quite like the premise that we're doing of young, kind of hungry, and these type of players, you know, energetic. I watched Rangers so many times last season, Cammy, and we spoke about it as well privately, that I can't help but think that we just at times lacked a wee bit of energy. We lacked that pace, and it was all a bit dull at times. And that obviously, try to watch us go forward and things. I thought that what we were trying to do under Clement, he just didn't have the tools to do it. And I thought sometimes tactically, like the cup final, I thought we were spot on. We just didn't have the legs. We just didn't have the energy or the ability to do it. So I can see what he's trying to do. And at the moment, you know, 3 in the door, another couple perspective, hopefully coming in within this next wee bit, and maybe even you chuck in the likes of Gamani, the Moroccan boy, and the young winger from Bayern, Kabadayi, that's right. So I'm getting confused. There's been so many linked, hasn't there? But you look at these guys perspectively being close as well. So there's a lot of business going on. I like it. I like the attitude of buying young so that you can enhance and get the best out of them. It's a better attitude to me, Cammy, than buying somebody that's already hit their ceiling and is perhaps not good enough, which I think, unfortunately, this squad has got quite a lot of members of the team that are that. But I like it. Obviously, Liam Kelly's an experienced 1-for-1 with Robbie McCrory going out for first team football, homegrown, that makes sense. But the boys that have come in are good. I'm still waiting, and I think this is fair. I'm still waiting on that wow factor first team players coming in. But understandably, these deals are probably a lot more difficult because teams won't want their best players going out the door that we might want to sign. And they might say things like, well, if you're taking our striker, then we need to replace him, and you're not getting him until we replace him first. So it's a bit like buying a house. I used that analogy this morning on Rangers Review. That it's a bit like buying a house when you're paying, you're waiting for the other to go and get a house, to get a mortgage, and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's some degree of truth in that with Rangers as well this summer, with regards to maybe the wow factor, the money being spent, the big signings. I think the ones so far have all been pretty obvious and pretty quick, all out of contract, and or the majority, sorry, out of contract and things. So that might make it easier. But I'm excited. I think it's long overdue that we have this kind of change of outlook within the squad, and so far I'm quietly content. I think that's probably the best way, Cammy. What about you?
Yeah, listen, I'm encouraged because I think that one of the things that we spoke about as we got towards the tail end of last season was that we needed an injection of energy. I think that Clement is very keen on being able to try and have a team that can move the ball forward quickly and with purpose. And there was times, and I think you've kind of surmised it perfectly, Stevie, where there was maybe players who. And again, it's difficult to tell through the optic of the end of the season, right? Because to use a manager's analogy, the season's always a marathon, right? So you're in the kind of few final 100 yards of that season. And, again, I want to be fair to the human beings, that these players are, that, they got the resurgence from the manager being able to come in, and from being out of a title race, they managed to get themselves back into it and lead. And so there comes that added pressure to be able to try and maintain that. Now, obviously, as you've said, if you do hit a ceiling, if you do get to a stage where, a fatigue sets in, there is a tiredness, then I totally understand that. But that also lent into the fact that we didn't have a squad that was capable enough to be able to rotate and rest players when it was needed. And, ultimately, I think we paid the price for that. For me, you're right. There is definitely, some I think a real trend in terms of some of those players that we are signing. They're all very young. And certainly in the conversations I've had, and I know that you've had as well, people will start to say, well, that's fine, but you can't just fill it with youth. You need to have a good blend of experience in there. And so I think one of the things for me, Stephen, I'm keen to get your thoughts on this, that the transfer market just now seems in a little bit of a stall because of the Euros. I think that once certain countries conclude their involvement within that tournament, and even when the tournament itself comes to a close, I think the transfer market will pick up really rapidly at that stage. There will obviously be players who will use the tournament and put themselves in the shop window. Maybe some players that clubs didn't have on their radar this tournament, and we've seen it so many times before. Will then start to have a proper look at, because they might have a great tournament. They might then say, right, well, actually, he does look like somebody we could look to be able to bring in. And then the cascade effect of that will then come down to us eventually, because I think you're absolutely right. When clubs will potentially lose players to bigger clubs for decent money, etc., they're then going to have to replace them. And so, yeah, there's a lot of moving parts to that as well. And when you're in the middle of an international tournament that's still, getting its way, and kind of kicking that off, we've still continued to do our business for the players that we know we can get at the moment. And I'm encouraged by that. I think that that's really important, but I do think things will start to get into hyperdrive once the Euros start to draw to a close.
Yeah, absolutely. Because a lot of agents will be out there, won't they? And they'll be watching players, watching their own players, dealing with their own kind of business before they're even concluding or trying to do transfer business of their own. So I think that's entirely fair. And then you also think, Cammy, at time of recording, we're currently sitting and it's almost half time. Croatia 0, Albania 1. And all of a sudden, there's going to be an influx of interest in these guys and where are they playing, and there's so much moving parts, as you said, but it's exciting. And I think that you're entirely right. Maybe a lull for a couple of weeks, and then once we come out of this and the tournament comes to an end, I think it'll be all guns blazing. From a Rangers point of view, that might be difficult with us going back to pre-season next Monday. But we've already done hopefully half a dozen players by that point, and I would say there's maybe still more, half a dozen more to come. So we've done a good job so far, and it will just be a case of continuing that pace.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I'll get your thoughts on some of the potential incomings and outgoings as we kind of wrap up. But we're here for the CEOs, Stevie. So let's jump into their questions as well. And kicking us off is John Smith. And he says, "Hi, Cammy. I'm sure this is an old question, but some of the recent decisions in games, how would you feel about getting offside chucked out of the game? Would it make for higher scoring games and a more entertaining product?" Stevie, you and I are both referees, so I think John's timed his question perfectly for us. Thoughts on removing the offside rule?
Well, it would make it a hell of a lot easier for us on a Saturday or Sunday morning, that's for sure. But would I like to see it removed? No. However, would I like to see it go towards what they're currently doing in this tournament? Yes. If you look at Ronaldo's header last night, which led to, I think, Jota putting in Portugal's perspective winner at 2-1 at that point within seconds, with this automated decision making, we knew that it was offside and it was a perfectly good decision. So I would like to see that enrolled. I don't know how much financially it could cost and things like that. But if you look at some of the decisions that has been made in English Premiership, especially given how long it's taken to make these decisions, I think that something like that, an AI kind of system behind that, could be wonderful, Cammy.
Yeah, personally, I wouldn't like to see offside removed. I think, and I do get there's a kind of wider argument, Stevie. That VAR, the people who are against it, it's kind of very much like a delayed reaction. You don't know where not to celebrate a goal because something could have happened in the build-up, or something's happened in the attacking phase of play. I do understand that argument because I think it can for some people dilute that sense of, do I have this joyous moment that again, even as you say with Ronaldo's attempt last night that eventually get put in, you've won it in the dying moments, but you don't know if you've won it in the dying moments or not. But we've been victims in our recent history, Stevie, of losing goals in cup finals that were offside, and they were incorrectly given pre-VAR, and we've lost a trophy as a result of it. And so for me, I wouldn't get rid of it. I do understand it'd be great to have more goals, and that's fantastic. But I also don't want to turn it into a basketball game where we've got goals or games that turn out like 5-4 and all of that kind of stuff. Plus, and I hear the David Edgar at the back of my head saying, "Aye, but if you've got a big guy up top, you just leave him up there. It doesn't matter who's marking him because you can just ping the ball up to him." I think that kind of starts to dilute the product a wee bit. And offside can be, absolutely enhanced, as you say, by the AI system that we've seen in the Euros. There is obviously a cost in the back of that. I think, in all honesty, I would absolutely expect to see it, down south next season, but it might be a few more seasons until we can generate the revenue in Scotland, until we get the same kind of system up here. Because let's face it, the SFA are tighter than two coats of paint. But all that being said, I also think it's an important role for linesmen. And now I will answer this with my referee hat on. And I know, Stevie, that as part of being able to try and go up through that refereeing structure, the linesman's a very, very important role as well. And as you progress into the kind of higher stages of it, being able to do the linesman responsibilities, or assistant referee, I keep calling them linesmen, but you know what I mean. But the lino responsibilities to then progress into being able to try and manage the game as a referee, there's an evolutionary step and a progress that comes with that, and I wouldn't want to see that removed.
No, I agree. It is frustrating. I think especially when, as you pointed out, we've celebrated goals only for them to come back, but it's part of the game, isn't it? You get some and you lose some. But I just think that the quickness of that Euro one was just so impressive to me. And if we can get there and firm up the whole kind of VAR stuff and things like that, Cammy, then I think it'll definitely be there. But I'm with you. Assistants definitely have a place in the game, and I think that they're a necessity. And I wouldn't mind a 5-4 if Rangers were on the end of the five, and they're getting, and the other team are getting the four. That would be all right with me, given the results we've had this season. But all joking aside, no, I'm enthusiastic about the way that the AI stuff is going, and the help that might get. I think it would just make it more athletic, more pleasing on the eye to watch. I think with that one.
Yeah, very fair. Richard McCluckey asks, are you worried about the signing targets and how it may impact our own youth path to the first team and the lack of a general Scottish feel to the club? The latter was a central core to our success. A fair comment regarding, I think that there has to be a Scottish interwoven part of the fabric within the club because, as Richard rightly says, Rangers have been very, very successful off the back of that. I think the challenge I would put to that is right now, I don't think our signing targets are going to stop youth progression into the first team because I don't think youth progression into the first team is really a thing at the moment. So I don't think you can land it at the door of the potential targets coming in. What I do think, though, Stevie, is that there is definitely a requirement for us to have a real proper overhaul of that progression path into the first team. And no matter who you have within the team and their ability, your own youth players should always feel that there is definitely a gateway to be able to get there.
Yeah, 100%. I'm going to slightly ramble on this in answer to Richard. That I'm very aware of what happens in our youth setup. I try and keep an eye on it in under 16s, under 14s, and things like that. I've been on the end of some atrocious results this season. Cammy, Hearts and Aberdeen are kind of ruling the roost of that age, and I put that very question to Rangers: that why are we on the end of kind of 8-0 and 6-0 defeats and that, which never should never happen at any level under Rangers. And the response was that if we can get 4 or 5 of those academy players out of that setup and they're the best in the country statistically and everything else, then we're doing our job, which is fine, which I understand completely. It's all about who you produce, and that's absolutely great. But there's another thing at Rangers that winning, it has to be ingrained throughout the club and throughout the identity. And if these guys at that age are accepting results like that because they just want to be the best, I don't agree with it. And that's something that I took up with the club in conversation. I believe that it's really important to have a balance of both. Now, it is obviously it's all about the players that come out of the academy, but for my opinion, they have to be entrenched in our values of winning at all costs. So there needs to be a balance of, if you're getting beat 6-0, it's not all right because you did your things right. That doesn't work for me. So in moving that forward up the rankings, I think when you get to the Bs and the under 21s and there's no football for them to play, I think that becomes massively difficult. If you look at last season, Ross McCausland would most likely have went out on loan or been maybe even transferred out. He certainly wouldn't have got a contract because only by chance and by his work and training did he manage to get through. I don't mean that to sound disparagingly to him, but it was a bit of an anomaly when you look at our youth kind of products of actually getting a game. So that gap, those years that there's no football to the first team, I think is really difficult for every club in Scotland. And I know Rangers have tried countless things which get knocked back because we feel that it's Rangers that's suggesting it. So that makes it really difficult. But the bridge there to the first team, Cammy, this is what I'm waffling on about, folks. Forgive me. Is exactly that. I agree with you completely. We need to somehow fix that, and we need to ensure that there's a pathway there. But what we need to do, and this is something that Adam Thornton's went on quite a lot, is that we need our youth team players that are coming through. Not every single one of them has to be Calvin Bassey, Nathan Patterson standards, where obviously I know Calvin Bassey didn't come through, but I'm talking about youths that have broken in and went for big money. We don't need that to happen. What we need is that to happen every 3-4 years would be wonderful. But we need guys that regularly come into the first team, do well, and then get value of 2, 3, 4 million pounds, which we can then turn over if we wish and go. So the likes of Ross McCausland, everybody says he's not good enough to be a right wing starter, etc., etc. That's fine. I don't have an issue with that, but he's certainly better to be in the squad in place of Scott Wright, Rabbi Matondo, etc., who are on extravagant amounts of money and not producing the same levels that his ceiling, because their ceiling's already hit and his isn't. So that's my kind of point of view. And I think as we, from a youth side of point of view, I think we have to get better to that. Now, the other side of the question is Scottish identity throughout the team. Every Scottish team that I've known, from Walter's 9-in-a-row team, has had a successful base of Scots: Gough, Robertson, McCall, McCoist, Johnston, etc., etc. Go back to Souness's years, you had Coopers and McCoys and Durrants and Ian Ferguson's. So they're all there. Then you go into our latter ones where you talk about like Alex McLeish and stuff like that. You had your Neil McCanns and things like that. So Barry Ferguson, Kevin Thompson come under Walter Smith. Walter Smith went and got Davy Weir. One of the first things he does. You've got to have an identity, and that's why potentially Connor Barron's a very good signing, and because he'll get it, and he kind of understands the background. Liam Kelly understands it, came through the club's ranks, etc., etc. You've got to have a base of that, and I'd like to be in a position where every summer we didn't have to keep doing this, didn't have to rebuild, so that when you do get guys like Lennon Miller, and you do get guys like young boy Watson at Kilmarnock, um, and even if you look at Dundee, they've got a couple of promising Scots that you might want to look at because your squad would already be built, and you can afford to then spend £3 million on Lennon Miller and take your time with him, much the same way as we done with Kenny Miller, Dick Advocat-esque era. So yeah, I'm all for a Scottish identity. I would love us to be able to cherry pick the best ones. I would love us to be able to bring the best ones through. I think that's entirely fair, Cammy. So hopefully, I appreciate that was a bit of a kind of long-winded answer, especially with the youth stuff. But I hope that kind of sums up where I am with it.
No, not at all, my friend. Not at all. I think some great nuggets in there as well. So, no, absolutely. You answer as freely as you wish, my friend. You take your time with it. Ross asks, I know this may have already been asked, but I guess how much do you think we will spend and how many signings do you think we'll bring in as things stand out as things stand out? Our signings are Cortez Diamandi Barron with starters, my opinion, with Kelly being a backup goalkeeper, Salah and Yefty, both projects with high potential. If Hamza signs it, I know he's a lot of hype in Morocco and is seventh in a list for the best under 23 strikers in the world. But again, he's not an alternative to Rahmani, would come in and be a starter. I hope main signings are still to come, and I hope we can find a good one. Garcia as an alternative, as he was one that excited me, and even the wingers we've been rumoured with, I don't see any of them as a starter. And I'm curious, Stevie, because you mentioned something earlier on, because I think that Ross's question links into, do we have like a wow signing coming in? So be interesting to see, if that happens across the course of the next few weeks. But in terms of expenditure and the amount of signings coming in, where do you think we'll land?
So this is purely hypothetical. I know that in the past, four lads and myself have been linked with, you know, confirming signings and whatever. So just to be clear, I don't have any information on this, but I'm happy to have a guesstimate, Cammy, which I think where it is, I'll go for 20 million spent. I'll go for incomings anywhere between 10 and 12 million. And when you factor in, Stevie, how you get that amount, I'm looking at Lammers, I'm looking at Hadji, I'm looking at potentially Ridvan, I'm looking at potentially Dessers as being the ones that will bring in that kind of money. You might get 500,000 from McCrory, Tom Lawrence, Keane Dowell kind of thing to make it all up. So that's what I'm going for. We've currently, I think we've lost six. I think there'll be another six going out, and that might include some really big names like James Tavernier, Connor Goldson, Tom Lawrence, Cyril Dessers, Sam Lammers, Yanis Hadji. I've rhymed off more than six, but from that, I think you've got the opportunity there. So you're looking at 12 out all in total. I think as well, we brought in three, potentially another three done. I think you're looking at six after that. So I'm looking at dozen in, dozen out. And I know that's a lot, but I think potentially that could be business.
Yeah, listen, I think that's perfectly valid because, there are going to be interest within that. One that, I hope that doesn't come about that you didn't mention there, but it was obviously Jack Butland as well. That could happen. We don't know, but this is but that might be a possibility as well.
Well, I was going to say I don't think Jack leaves, and this is purely my own thinking. I don't think Jack Butland will go. I think Forrest was probably the most likely ambition for him, or their ambition for him rather. And I don't see him going there. I don't see them coming back in because I think they're looking at other keepers. I think Rangers would be north of £12 million to deal with. I don't think clubs will bid that. I think that Jack himself is very happy up here. I know he's trying to get his kids enrolled in schools and stuff like that. That to me, Cammy, isn't a guy that's desperate to leave. It's obviously caveated with if a massive bid comes in, like any of our players, then it's going to happen. But I'm quietly confident that Jack Butland will still be Rangers number one.
Yeah, listen, so am I. I mean, if he leaves now, I'm going to blame you. But if you see the desire for us to be able to try and do business and have, that overhaul that you mentioned there of potential a dozen in and a dozen out. And I don't think it's selfish of players, Stevie, of a certain quality within the club where they will almost have their own demands that if they feel that the team needs a transition, if the team needs certain gaps to be filled, if they are being proactive within it, that encourages players to stay. And I know that there's been stories in the past, of clubs down south and, your Ronaldos and Wayne Rooney's and stuff as well. And they've kind of went back to the manager and to the board and said, what's our ambitions for next season? And I think that's a perfectly valid question. I think when you see guys like Jack Butland, he has came here to win trophies. He has came with a view of being able to try and play as much football as he can. Now we've certainly ticked the second box with him, and we will continue to do so, even with the Liam Kelly signing if that does get over the line. But I think it's perfectly valid to be able to have players encouraged to remain at the club if you can show that if you've not had the season that you wanted. I'm not going to say last season was incredibly disappointing because I think that we just got a little bit of a kind of an upsurge because we remounted a title challenge that fundamentally was dead in the water. But next season it is about challenging for the title as it always should be. And I think for me it's a positive to be able to show the ones that are already here. No, we're not going to have a malaise in terms of doing the business that we need to do. So no, listen, I think perfectly valid. Perfectly valid. Coming back to VAR, Stevie Graham Roy asks, hi, Cammy, watching the games with my other half said VAR is ruining the games. It's hard to disagree, especially if you consider the decisions that went against us last season. It's not going, but should we move to an appeals system? For example, you get 2 appeals per game, and if it's successful, you keep the 2, and if it fails, you lose 1. I think we need to change it, especially for every single goal check. So, yeah, I've heard discussions about this in the past. I get the premise, and I think that, it almost feels like we're moving into like a tennis-based system. However, there's a huge emphasis, Stevie, that we want VAR to be as slick as possible and to avoid any potential delay. And I think that this starts to come into that area a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. My instant response to that is no. I'm sorry if that's pretty blunt, but you would want it to be as slick. And we're talking about AI and offside and stuff, and trying to get that faster, and we all enjoy that. I'm not for having appeals. What I would like to see done, and I do agree with the complaint about VAR, and I do even agree that it's maybe spoiling the game. I understand that it shouldn't if it's worked properly. My answer to that would be we need to properly educate the people that are doing it. We need to see a greater level of consistency because I'll factor one thing, and this isn't sour grapes. Tom Lawrence fouled on the build up to Cyril Dessers equalising at 2-2 in the 3-each draw at Ibrox. It was 12 seconds before Rangers scored that goal, and it was almost like they went back to find a reason not to give it. Now, it was the correct decision. I've got absolutely no problem in that at all. Let's fast forward it then to the cup final when Nico Raskin was punished for a slight nudge on Joe Hart. I'm absolutely fine if you're calling that a foul, not a problem at all. But let's journey back 5 seconds before that. And can somebody explain to me why Greg Taylor's fouling Nico Raskin in a bear hug style and it's not getting picked up? That's the level of consistency I want to see fixed. And that's nothing to do with it being us, because there's been some other decisions in the league. I remember watching St Mirren up at Ross County, I believe, that my memory serves me right, and there was like an atrocious penalty decision given, and it was for handball, and they didn't give it, and if they had just have looked back a couple of seconds, they would have seen the same foul and stuff like that, and they had to apologise because they said they were too busy concentrating on one thing and didn't see the other, and that's the kind of decisions that are happening not only to Rangers but to everyone throughout the league, and there just needs to be a better standards of usage of the facilities we have, because I genuinely think that artificial intelligence for the offsides is the way to go. I genuinely think VAR in football is the way to go, but there needs to be a greater level of training and there needs to be a greater level of consistency throughout the application of it.
Yes, and I'm certain that will come with our new head of referees. Insert your long pause here. Okay, let's carry on. Andy Elliott asked Stevie, with most people agreeing that we need to break the cycle of replacing the manager every year and that Big Phil deserves to be given time, But suppose we lose the first two Old Firm games, but are still in the title fight. Do we stick or twist? An interesting one, I think, because I know people were obviously projecting that if we lost the Scottish Cup final, the first Old Firm game is then at Parkhead, and so therefore, it's not conducive to being able to try and generate, an opportunity to beat them. We obviously did lose the Scottish Cup final. If we lose the first two Old Firm games of the season, with obviously one of them being at Ibrox at the turn of the year, what's your thoughts at that point? Do we go back to type and potentially replace the manager, albeit a few months after we've done in the past? Or if we're still within the title fight, stand by him?
We absolutely stand by him. And as difficult as it is, we need to get out of this cycle of refreshing our management situation, a month or two into the season. Now, I will say that Michael Beale was an absolute necessity, and that came on the back of a horror show of a pre-season, which was such a mess. Olympiacos and stuff like that beating us with ease was quite painful to watch. So I think that one, especially after Kilmarnock at home, was really difficult. The other flip side to that is if your two defeats are 4-0 and 3-0, like the way that we've seen them in the past, then we've got big issues with Philip Clement. But I would say, and this might be clutching, right? And we can sit here in a couple of months and say, Stevie, once again, you got it massively wrong, and I'm prepared to accept that. I seen enough from Philip Clement when this team was functioning to say that this guy knows what he's doing, and it's absolutely no surprise to me that when injuries and when fitness and when we did just basically run out of steam, that things kind of fell apart a wee bit. But some of the football we were playing at the time, when you're going to Easter Road, winning 3-0, you're going to Hearts at home at the time where they're flying, dismantling them 5-0 and stuff like that. Some of the football really was excellent. And should have been only one winner on that Scottish Cup. The way that he set them up, the way that we went was absolutely perfect. We just didn't have the quality. That's not on Philip Clement, that's on what's already there, and an injury situation that was beyond absolutely ridiculous. So I am at the moment quietly enthusiastic about what he's done and what he's doing. I do like him. I am not blind to the fact that if we get gubbed a couple of times, it's going to be really difficult. But Steven Gerrard got away with absolute murder in terms of management of Rangers compared to what we've sacked Gio and others for, because he showed us direction and we got those improvements and things like that. I think overall, if we're still in a title race and Philip Clement's doing that, then he survives. I remember Alex McLeish, you know, losing Celtic games and stuff with 4 or 5 games to go and still managing to win those leagues. And ultimately, as painful as it would be and as difficult as it would be, and our reaction is sometimes burn everything down, we might need to just show a wee bit of patience, especially at the start of the season when August has got 9 games and we are bringing in the best part of a dozen players. I think there needs to be a realism. No matter how badly it goes, you're almost drawing a line in the sand and saying, right, this is our guy. We're sticking with him. This is going to be a journey that needs a few windows, and we just need to put all our faith in this guy and see where it takes us. And I'm comfortable with that. And I know it's okay to say it now. Ask me 4 weeks into the season if it's going tits up again, what my mood would be like. I get that completely. But I'm not, Cammy. We cannot continue this cycle of get somebody in, get an upsurge, the typical down surge, and then we bin them 5 weeks into a season. It has to stop. We need to draw a line and say, this is our guy. We're sticking with it. Let's see how the whole season pans out before we go anywhere else.
Yeah, there's a few things into that, because I think, listen, you're totally right. I agree with you. I think if we're still in the title fight at that stage as well, then just being able to beat Celtic shouldn't be the only prerequisite for a Rangers manager. So, but the other things I can include within that, Stevie, are I also think that we're smart enough as a fan base that, to lend to your point, that if a manager is coming in and you can start to see what he's doing, you can start to see through the style of play, through some of the performances, predominantly outside of the Old Firm games, because they're, a wee world of their own. But I think we're smart enough to see what the manager is trying to do, and again, giving Clement the benefit of, the first full season with what is going to be a very, very different team. But equally, and again, a point that you mentioned there as well, we did have players, a lot of whom have left now, more may still leave, who reacted well to a new manager. As a group, they all did that. And we got a little bit of a kind of uplift from them, and then it kind of tapered off. It felt a little bit to me, if I'm being honest, that and another few factors led to why we didn't win the league last season. However, there isn't a guarantee that changing the manager under this new group of players guarantees that upsurge. So I think you can kind of go on past experience, but this will be, a different kettle of fish altogether. And the third thing, I'm going to tie this into the next question, which comes from David Clapperton, is, hi, Cammy. Hope all is well. Just how important, realistic or otherwise, is it for us as fans to be patient this summer with the club? Firstly, getting players in, and when the new season starts, to be patient and understanding when with the new players that arrive. By the looks of it, we're going to be signing a fair amount of young, inexperienced players that will undoubtedly take time to find their feet. And is this going to be as much a test for us as it is for them? So David's point there, Stevie, was something that I was going to kind of lean into a little bit there as well, was it's not just about the manager, it's also about these players acclimatising to Scotland. And David Edgar and I actually spoke on yesterday's update about Connor Barron. Now, you can look at that on face value and say, well, Connor Barron knows the Scottish games, but he doesn't know the Scottish games when it comes to playing for Rangers and when the vast majority of your domestic opponents treat it as a cup final. So there's an element of that which I think is about that thing that as a Rangers fan base we're not brilliant at, which is being patient, allowing some bedding in time. We can offset that with seeing progress, right? It's not about getting in and winning every game 5-0 in the first, few games of the season and thinking, right, that's it, we're celebrating 56. But if we can see that road to progression, if we are within that title fight, then exactly as you said there, I think we stick with Clement, but we also give these players the time to embed.
Yeah, I think 100%. I think patience for me is what I lack, and I'll tell you honestly, Cammy, as a supporter, excuse the French a wee bit, but it's either sugar or shite for me, and I'm terrible for overreacting to things. And I know within myself, especially with having my platform and that I need to be a bit more understanding of the magnitude of the job and task at hand, and not be as judgmental of the likes of Conor Barron, Hefty, whatever. I'm very bad for making instant decisions, and I think that if you look at our fan base, and perhaps even look at Cyril Dessers this year and some of the way that he's been viewed upon, I think even if you agree that he's not quite the standard we need, I think that's not a universally unpopular thing to say. He's still done well in grabbing 22 goals, and he's durable, and he's always there, he's always available, and given everything that we went through, I think that's pretty admirable. And the balls of the boy to come back, countless times, we pretty much all ridiculed and made him a joke figure in the stands. And I think that for us, there's times where it can be really toxic. Personally, I need to stop that kind of reaction, and understand that as well. But there's a desperate desire amongst me and the wider fan base, I think, of just we need to win. And I think that it's got, if we thought we were impatient under Steven Gerrard, we're certainly a million times more at this moment in time. So it's a 2-for-1 there, I think. But you're absolutely right. We do need to be patient. It's a really good question. It's a really good point. And I think that it all depends on how we start. Like it genuinely does. If we get a decent pre-season, it doesn't need to be all 4-0, 5-0 wins, but if we can say enough to say, right, okay, this looks all right, this looks like it's going in the right direction. The first 9 games in August, which Champions League qualification is so massive, they don't need to be 9 wins. We need to see 9 promising performances and things. We'd love it to be 9 wins, don't get me wrong. The Rangers, you need to win everything. As long as we're on the right way, I think it gives you a base for the rest of the season. As long as nothing catastrophic happens, like a Kilmarnock away in the first game of the season and stuff, that can't happen again. So I think there's little caveats to everything, obviously, but we definitely need to show that level of patience that's mentioned in the question. Absolutely, it's a really good question, and it's a really good point.
Yes, our CEOs always make sure that they step up to the mark. Thank you for that question, David. Moving on, Stevie, and by the way, just to also kind of compliment that point as well, you use Odessa's example whenever I talk about this, and I have to remind myself, because you're right, our bloodthirst to win does absolutely knock our patience out the park at the time as well. But what I would say is a lot of people wrote off Sema at the beginning of the season, and I'm absolutely of the belief that had we been able to try and maintain his fitness levels across the course of the season would have turned out very differently. So there's just another example of trying to hopefully exercise some patience where you can. But listen, it's incredibly tough. Watson Bell, no relation, but I wish he was because he's a great guy, asks, "Hi, Cammy. I have a couple of questions. I'm like many Rangers fans, utterly disinterested in the Scottish national team to the point where if they were played in my back garden, I'd close my curtains. Should the Rangers support try and reclaim the national side? And if so, how do we go about it?" I'll let you answer that one first, Steve, before I come on to Watson's second question.
So, firstly, I think in terms of Scottish national team, I can absolutely understand anyone that's not interested, given the events of 2012, given that everything that is mentioned is turned into an independence debate. Everything that goes on is an SFA versus Rangers, blah, 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 blah. Some of the treatment that we have received because we're Rangers arguably has turned people away from the support. I think then when you couple in the fact that the Tartan Army are haters of Rangers, by their own judgment or by their own kind of behaviour of booing our players, etc. I 100% understand it. However, I'll counter it with one thing. We are Scottish. We're allowed to be supportive and we're allowed to be proud of our national team. Doesn't mean we need to like Steve Clark. Doesn't mean we need to like the governing bodies. It doesn't even mean that you need to like the players that are playing. So I think we should always bear that in mind when it comes to our country. Rangers have always been a massive part of Scotland. They've always had a massive following within the national team. The booing, etc., of Rangers players isn't something new. It's always been a Glasgow versus everyone else kind of viewpoint, and I think it's only became louder and more visible to our support because of what went on 12 years ago, and the fact that we then all concentrated on what was happening at our club, and Scotland kind of became a byproduct of it. So, in answer to the question, I would always say proudly support your national team and don't let other people say, oh, you can't be this because it's very anti Rangers, it's very this and that. And I understand it. It's not something I agree with. And I believe that if you want to support Scotland, absolutely go for it.
Yeah, listen, I do get it. I think, and again, please forgive me because I don't want to turn this into, a political tangent, but I also think the current political climate within the country is being purposely engineered to stoke some of that division. And again, I think as part of that, that's definitely playing a factor as far as I'm concerned. I'm happy to have the conversation with anyone who fundamentally disagrees with that, but that's just my tuppence worth on it. I think one of the things that always strikes me whenever I see England playing, Stevie, is they're able to remove themselves from this parochial feel of, and you hit the nail on the head there, where it's like Glasgow versus Scotland. Because also, when I see, and listen, I'm not a big fan of the English team or the English national side. I'm not. I couldn't really care either. But one thing that I'm envious of is that they put all of their club allegiances to one side, and you'll have Port Vale fans sitting alongside Man City fans, sitting alongside Stoke fans, because they rally together to be able to do that. And if you watch any England games, you'll see that. You'll see all the flags in the stand to be able to try and do that. And I think that through the national team, through what happened to us in 2012, through the political sphere at the moment, I just think that the country's divided as well, and it's tough for us to be able to generate enthusiasm for the national team. I don't know if the silver bullet to that is a Scotland manager who comes in and dictates the fact that you know that split between Rangers and the rest of the country is counterproductive to anything that the national team is trying to do, because it is, right. It absolutely is. And I would encourage every single Scottish player who plays for Rangers to always aim towards being able to try and get into the national team, because I know how much it means to them as a player. But yeah, that is definitely something that for me, I would like to see rectified because I'd like to start caring about Scotland again. It's just really tough for me to do so at the moment, and I think there's plenty of our fans who we've even got podders across in Germany at the moment. Do you know what I mean? And I hope they have a brilliant time. I hope Scotland do well for them. But it's tough for me to be encouraged about it. Watson also asks Stevie a little bit kind of closer to home with the current atmosphere in the Scottish media where everything Rangers is portrayed as bad, apart from playing into the long game, i.e., getting more blue noses into the media. Do you feel there's anything short term that we can do to try and change the balance of power?
Well, it's an interesting question. I think that what disappoints me is that this season, I think particularly you have seen Rangers play ball with the media, and I think that it's really disappointing to see that be returned back with a volleyed serve of some pretty pointed criticism by the likes of your Bill Lakey's, your Tom English's, etc. And then they sit and expect sit down interviews with Jack Butland, etc. That to me is really disappointing, and that is where I think Rangers have entitled to be disappointed with some of the coverage that they've received from certain members of the press pack, especially when Rangers are welcoming them in a match day and giving them access and everything else. So it's a fine line of how do you balance that. If it's so inherently better within you, I don't think there's anything you can do because you can give them access and everything to everything, and individually that still kind of lets you down. So what Rangers are doing with their media is thoroughly, I think, from our point of view, fan media and stuff, really commendable. We are given massive access. We return that. David puts in Heart and Hand, put in a lot of money. Four Lads put in a lot of money. Follow put in a lot of money to sponsorship and advertising. So it works in both ways. So we support each other. But I think that Rangers are to be commended. How do you change the landscape inherently? I think it's become sport in the last um, 12 years or so to kick Rangers when they're down. And the only real way to change that, ironically enough, is to have a winning team on the park where they cannot come back at us because it then becomes really easy for the club to set a narrative that's not currently there at the moment. So, it would be really easy to bite back at people who take small points and try and hurt the club with it by saying you're only saying this because we're winning. And at the moment we can't. So it's a really interesting question. It's probably a whole pod you could dedicate to talking about the media and stuff like that. And the matchday media that turn up at Ibrox are all inherently good lads. There's people that you can see a mile away that don't support Rangers and aren't interested in kind of being favourable. But that's just the way it is, unfortunately. I think that Rangers are doing a good job. I think that they cannot return to a place where people are getting banned and it becomes a war with stuff. That didn't work. It didn't prove to be popular either. So it's finding a balance. But Cammy, that's almost like $1 million question of how you fix the media. I don't think it's possible, but it is it's a brilliant question.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head when you talk about we have to come from a place of success. I think when and forgive this because I'm paraphrasing, but if you start to bump your gums about decisions about people who say nasty things about you, the easiest way to shut them up is to be in first place and to win things and to be successful and look at it from the top of the tree. You're right. It's a really difficult question to answer. I think that as Rangers can grow within, regaining where we should be rightfully, then I think at the same point as well we can start to almost to a certain extent dictate terms because I don't want to necessarily see bannings. I mean, apart from Michael Stewart, the Daily Record, but what I would say is, look at someone like Chris Sutton, and I think we are. As far as I'm concerned, we're an educated enough fan base that you now see. So now you can now see through what Chris Sutton does up here because he's a pantomime character in Scotland. But as much as I loathe to say it, but it is true, when he covers anything within English media, he's actually far more reasoned. So he's dialing it up because he gets paid by Celtic, so there's certain other people in order to be able to try and drive that narrative. I don't necessarily want people. I mean, I do appreciate things that Boydie does and stuff within the media because I get where it comes into. But at the same point as well, I think that that's where they've had it too easy for too long in terms of the club that they are paid by, been able to try and dictate that, and they can do because, as I say, they've as much as I hate to say it, been successful. So we need to change that narrative. Stevie, we'll close up on a couple of what I think is really interesting questions. Keen to get your thoughts on this. So first of all, from Davy Stewart, he asks if you could have any superpower from the Marvel universe, who would you choose and why? So what Marvel character would you like to be, Stevie?
I'd like to be anyone that's close to Scarlett Johansson in Marvel, but I've always fancied myself to be invisible, just to get some quiet time. And I think younger people won't understand that. But when you've had two children and live a life that is fantastic, by the way, but it's got a full time job, four lads, writing for papers, etc., etc. Sometimes, Cammy, you just need 10 minutes. So a little invisibility every now and then would be quite nice.
Yeah, so that would make you Sue Storm from the Fantastic Four. Yes, that's how much of a geek I am. So it's interesting you picked a female character, Stevie, but I do like it. I'll join your team then, and I'll be the Thing, because I would quite like to just be quite a big guy that people couldn't call fat unless you'd be willing to get a rock to the face. So yeah, it would allow me to get away with my obesity a wee bit as well. But Davey also continues, and this is going to be our final question, Stevie. And he says, if you rubbed a magic lamp and a genie popped out and granted you 3 wishes, what would they be? So if they wanted to be 3 Rangers related ones or just 3 for you, I'm happy to open the floor to you.
3 Rangers ones, quite easy. I would like a bigger stadium. I would like a winning team, and I would like a functioning club that just runs smoothly. And it doesn't need to be, everything's wonderful, because there'll be things we don't disagree with, but it would be great if just everything didn't feel like it was an absolute cluster all the time. So that's my Rangers ones. If it was 3 personally, Cammy, I would like my 2 boys to be wonderfully happy and have happy lives. I would like friends and family to have the same. So that would be 2 wishes. Selfishly, if some things could be enhanced, then that would be my 3rd and final wish.
Yeah, it's interesting because we were talking about that just before we came on air, and you looked at that question. You said you wish was something could be bigger, and I didn't know you meant Ibrox. But there you go. Yeah, I think I would echo your Rangers ones. It's about being able to get back to where we rightfully belong and having that consistency, which is what I'd love. For me, for another wish for Rangers would just be to make sure that we've got financial stability and perpetuity, to make sure that we never go back to the situations that we've already discussed 12 years ago. I do like the idea of a bigger stadium. I would like to see our entire footprint improved. And I think we've done work in that area, if I'm being honest. I've said that before, where, I'd love people to come over to Ibrox, even non-football fans, to be able to come over, see that magnificent stadium, being able to go in and take in a lot of our culture and heritage in the Rangers Museum, etc. So I'd like to see us being able to try and continue that. For me personally, all the more success in terms of for friends and family and stuff as well. Life's too short, Stevie. I think you and I both have come to realise that, where we just want those around us to be nice and happy. A few extra quid would help to probably help out with that. So I don't know if I would go down that winning lottery ticket route. And my final wish would be just to make sure that everybody makes sure that they know that they can always reach out if they ever need anything from a help perspective and stuff as well. We don't do enough, as far as I'm concerned, to make sure that we look out for one another. And I'd love for us to be able to try and do that a wee bit more as well, because, as I say, we've both lost friends, Stevie, who haven't been in great places, and we wish that we're still here. So, yeah, absolutely. Just for everyone to love each other a little bit more would be great. Not necessarily if you're a fan of a certain club, but I can overlook that in some cases. That will do us for our questions and for the show this week. Stevie, just before I let you go, because I know you're a busy man this afternoon with the kids as well, just thank you so much for coming on. Love to be able to offer my services if I can ever help on Four Lads. You guys are doing a great job, but as I say, if you'd ever like me to bring the levels down at some point, I'm happy to jump on and potentially half your listening membership.
Bringing the quality up, Cammy. You're always welcome. What is actually disappointing is that we haven't done this as much as we should. It's always great fun, and just a wee thank you to all the people that have sent in questions and everybody that's going to listen to it. It really is a joy to pop on and and speak away. And if people want to give Four Lads a look and give it a try, I would love it to be everyone's second favourite podcast, because Heart and Hand, I think, will always remain everybody's first. Even myself, it's your first love, isn't it? But if people could squeeze in a wee half an hour a week, then I'd love it if they come and watch what we're doing and have a laugh with us. And we're also, I think, kind of pioneering the whole vlogging kind of thing on a match day, Cammy, which can be quite fun when you're winning. It can be desperately difficult if you're 2-0 down against Celtic and then 3-2 down the moment you equalise and you're recording just as they go ahead again. But it can be fun. And we're doing things like that, which I think is important. I never wanted to go down the route of just simply copying. So we've tried to do a few new things. So if you want a favourite second Rangers podcast, we'd love it if you come in and cover it and had a look at it. And Cammy, I'd also love it if you popped over at any time.
Absolutely, my friend. Absolutely. Just let me know. My door is always open to you. Folks, as Stevie mentioned there, thank you so much to our CEOs for their questions. Hope you've enjoyed listening to it as much as Stevie and I have enjoyed talking about it. If you want to jump over to Heart and Hand for your Rangers fix, if you're not already a member, you don't need to be a CEO. You can pick any membership tier you like. And you can find us on patreon.com/Heart and Hand. Just before I wrap up, a little shout out as well to say that we are having our next live show at New Edmondson House. Dates are to be confirmed. It will be in August. However, we will provide pre-sale links on there, as we always do, to our subscribers. So please jump on and do that. Stevie, I would love it if you could be there once we get the date confirmed and stuff as well. It'd be great to see you.
Yeah, that would actually be a lot of fun. So obviously the live shows are good and the live shows are fun. So yes, let's do it and be nice. August is a good time to do it, isn't it? Because hopefully everybody will be nice and positive, looking forward to the new season, and it's always good to see everybody from Heart and Hand team.
Yeah, thank you, buddy. Thank you to our executive producers, Mike Lee and Paul Miles, and thank you all for listening. We will be back again with some shows across the next few weeks and stuff as well for you to listen to. But you know where to go to if you'd like some Rangers-related content, either with ourselves in Heart and Hand or, as I say, with Stevie at Four Lads and stuff as well. We will speak to you again very, very soon. Thanks all.